Welcome to Inside the Tape, an Inside the Birds presentation. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan, and with us, as always, the king of tape breakdown, Greg Cosell. And of course, Greg, we are going to break down the tape through your eyes from the Eagles' airtight win over the New Orleans Saints. I think that's a good way to describe it, right? Airtight win or snatching wins, win from the jaws of the beat.
We're not in the same room, Geoff, so we won't run into one another.
That is true.
I got that. Very nice.
I get where you're going with that, Greg, and I'm sure everybody else does too. But nonetheless, the Eagles still win a game. We want to start this show off the way we always do with you, Greg, which is, I mean, you've watched the tape, you've seen it all, offensively, defensively. Before we really start cutting it up, just give me what jumped out to you on tape, some initial thoughts, both offensively and defensively.
Well, I think you have to start defensively with the approach that Vic Fangio took, because I thought that it was tactically a really, really smart approach. Not that Vic Fangio needs me to tell him that. I think he's done a pretty good job in his whatever number of years in the league. And it's just good that he went from being an idiot to a genius in 1 week. But I thought defensively, and we'll get into the specifics, Geoff, obviously, some of the specifics, but I thought just the tactical approach that was specific to this opponent was just really, really special. And on the other side of the ball, we'll talk Saquon. Obviously, I think he's running better than I've ever seen him run. But I thought Jalen Hurts played a much better game against the Saints, despite the fact that they did not score a lot of points than he did the week prior. And I think that's a positive sign.
Absolutely.
Greg, one question, one follow-up on this. So, again, we've only played 3 weeks. Of all the defensive tape, I know you when you go through tape, you take your notes and so forth. But just off the top of your head, was this one of the most impressive defensive performances for a team you've seen so far, the Eagles last week?
Yes, in the sense that it was totally unexpected, Adam. That's the thing. I mean, I've seen, I've been doing this a long time, as you well know. So it's not like I've never seen good tactical defensive performances. But I think all three of us would likely agree that we did not expect that. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I mean, given what happened, the first 2 weeks, that we did not expect that. And I think that's why, for people who are listening, and I hope it's a good number of people, that's why I don't rip coaches ever. Because, these guys work so hard. They've been doing it for a long time. It's the NFL. You guys both know from talking to people through the years that all you hear is how hard it is to win on Sundays. Even when you're playing teams that most people think are bad teams. I mean, just look what happened with the Panthers. They changed quarterbacks to Andy Dalton, and all of a sudden they look like they're a quality NFL team. So you just have to be careful, about this, because these guys work so hard and put plans together. They work 16, 18 hours a day. As I said, Vic Fangio's been doing this a long time. He studied that defense. I'm sure he knew an awful lot about it because of Clint Kubiak and his background, because coaches coach against coaches. They understand how teams want to play, how coaches want to do certain things. And then you build your scheme very often based on that.
Greg, after 3 games, and we'll get into the game here against the Saints in 1 second, but do you have a feel yet, do you think, for this Eagles team, or have the inconsistency and the injuries made that difficult?
Still difficult, Geoff.
I would agree.
Yeah. I think obviously we're coming off a great defensive game. But and we'll get into the play of specific players that I think have to play at a really high level for this defense to continue to be good. But I don't think I have a great feel for their entire defense. This was an opponent-specific approach that was masterful. I don't know if he's going to do this every week. My guess is there'll be elements of it every week, but it won't be quite the way it was against the Saints.
Right. All right. So let's get into the defense, because that, as you said, just really jumped out. Of course, for everybody, it jumped out, especially how loose they were against the run against the Falcons in week 2, and then a complete turnaround against the Saints. So what is it schematically that you saw on tape that changed, or was it simply just players playing better?
No,
Give me what you saw.
no. I mean, here we'll just get this out there at first. Jalen Carter was the most dominant player in on the Eagles defense and on the Saints offense for that unit matchup. Jalen Carter was the most dominant player, played one of his best games at the Eagles. We'll just get that out there. But what we saw, and it started on the first possession, Geoff, 1st and 10 on the first possession. It was just outside the red zone on the Saints' first possession. The Eagles jumped into a 6-man front. Zach Bond walked up on the edge with the front shifting inside with two techniques. And that's really important because what a two technique is, it means that someone's lined up right over guards, okay? And that makes the zone blocking scheme tougher because you have someone right in front of you, so you can't really climb. You have to block, almost man, even if it's a zone blocking scheme call, there's a man right in front of you. So they had two techniques in Ojamo and Booker. And Carter on that play, he shocked the right tackle Penning, driving him back and making the tackle for 1 yard. So that's where you saw the 6-man front for the first time, and they did that a number of times. And then they did it again on the same first possession. It was in the high red zone. Bond again walked up on the edge with two techniques in Williams and Davis. And this was really an important part of their defensive front approach, and it was really, really effective.
Wow. You've watched Fangio for years, Greg. Is he static? Does he change up? Like what's been his process over the years?
I mean, I think he changes up. I think obviously the feeling about Fangio was more what he did on the back end, which he's a quarters guy, and he lines up with the 4 across, and from the 4 across you can go anywhere. The coverage can do anything. But I think front wise, I think there's been multiplicity in what he does. The bottom line is you have to be multiple with your fronts in the NFL. You can't just line up in the same front play after play after play. But the 6-man front in this game, and I mentioned this with our Patreon folks the other night, it reminded me very much of what Bill Belichick did in the Super Bowl against the Rams when they had the outstanding outside zone run game, which is the foundation of the Saints, certainly through the first 2 weeks of the season. And you line up in a 6-man front and you take that away. And he did that really, really well in this game.
So, Greg, I believe I have that clip that we'll look at soon that you just mentioned of the first 6-man front. But also, I think people are asking, well, why didn't Vic Fangio just do this a week sooner against the Atlanta Falcons? Can you talk about what the New Orleans Saints did from an offensive personnel standpoint that may have invited Vic Fangio to play those different kinds of fronts?
I think Vic Fangio probably, and there was no question that the Falcons hurt the Eagles as well with the outside zone run game. There's no question. We talked about that last week. But don't forget, he also might have been feeling, and this is where it's tough for a coach. And I hope fans understand this. When you look at this Eagles defensive front, for the most part, you probably think that they have pretty good run defenders. So it's easy to say, well, let's do something. But when you go into the season, you probably feel pretty confident, Geoff, that I've got Jalen Carter. He can be a dominant player. Traits-wise, you could make the argument that he could be a top 3 or 4 defensive tackle in the league if he develops. You like to believe that Jordan Davis is a really good run defender and that, maybe he's not a good pass rusher and he obviously doesn't play on 3rd down, but that he's a really good run defender. Milton Williams has shown to be a quality run defender, So I'm sure he was thinking when they played the Falcons, you know what, I've got a good D-line. They can line up and they can stop the run.
Right.
And then you go through the game and you realize, oh, maybe I've got some issues and I'm going to have to tactically change the way I play to play another team that has been dominant with the outside zone run game.
Right.
So, it's always easy. I say this all the time, and, everybody who listens to me knows I'm a process guy. Once you have access to the results, and I don't say this sarcastically, but then everybody feels like they know because you have access to the results, So I don't think that way because that's easy. It's easy when it happens to say, well, they should have done this, that didn't work, or that's easy. So you have to go through an entire process, and sometimes you have to figure things out on the fly.
Right.
And don't forget, guys don't play in the preseason.
Right. And to your point, it wasn't just scheme. Guys played really well. You mentioned Jalen Carter. He played an extraordinary game.
Extraordinary game.
I was trying to make a few clips for everyone to see, And I joked with Adam about this. I was at not even at halftime, and I already had like 6 or 7. I think this is
Yeah, there were probably 10,
this
11
is too
plays.
many. Yeah,
Yeah, there
there
were probably
was.
10, 11 plays, Jeff, where you could have just done Jalen Carter and said, that's really impressive work. And even times when he didn't make the play, but
Right.
just dominated. That's one thing I learned doing college work over the years is when you watch interior defensive linemen, looking at a stat sheet means nothing. There are times I've watched interior defensive linemen in college. They had one tackle, and then I watched the whole game, and they dominated the game. So you can't just judge by tackles for number of tackles for a defensive tackle or an interior defensive lineman.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so why don't we take a look at some of the damage inflicted by Jordan Carter and some of those multiple types of fronts that Vic Fangio played, especially against the run.
I think one important point, Jeff, as well, is that they walked up into a 6-man front, because that means that the blocking has to change a little bit, and it happens late just before the ball snapped. And that was a critical piece of the defensive puzzle.
Okay, Greg, this might have been the play that you were referring to. I just let it go for a second so people could see.
Yeah, is this the play on the first series?
It is the first quarter. It's no
Yeah.
scores. 1st and 10 at the Eagles' 25-yard line.
I think this is that first play where they went into the 6-man front. Actually, you can see right now where it's frozen, and you just moved it where Bond started in a stacked position, and
Right.
he walks up outside of, I believe that's Josh Sweat here.
Yes.
And so now you have a 6-man front, and notice how they then reduced the front to that side. So they brought in, and that's what I call two techniques. So you have 2 defensive tackles, interior D linemen, head up on the offensive guards. And that kind of changes how you have to block this particular run.
Sure. And here we have the interior line, and Jordan Davis is lined up over the right guard Jalen Carter is lined up over right guard. So as we start to see the play unfold here, which is under center for the Saints, which they work quite a bit, as you're mentioning, you're having a whole lot of guys to block up front there.
I think Carter's lined up actually over the right tackle here, because this is the play.
Correct.
The play
I'm sorry, it is right tackle. Yes.
Where he just jarred. Look at him jar Penning and create a new line of scrimmage right there. He came off the ball. He jarred Trevor Penning, the right tackle. He pushed him back 3 yards. That's what you want. What did we talk about last week when we talked about the Falcons run game? How they played laterally? Didn't we talk about that?
Yes.
Yep.
That's not playing laterally. That's what you want to do.
So the point here also is you could create a spot for the linebacker to run through and
that's the other factor is when you have a 6-man front, you free up Dean, who, by the way, is small, so you don't want offensive linemen climbing up to Dean because he gets swallowed up. So now he has freedom of movement, and he made a number of plays, guys, where he had freedom of movement and could flow to the ball.
Right.
But you want to change the line of scrimmage. You don't want to play laterally.
And you see other guys too creating penetration here in the backfield. I mean, like you just said, the Saints did not reset the line of scrimmage, and then with Jalen Carter again, you see the rare athleticism and power because Greg winds up ripping off Penning.
Well, then because then he plays off contact and makes the tackle.
That's impressive.
That's a big time play.
Tackling, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, if we get the
other thing about, and you can see it from the end zone, it's actually even clearer. You can see Carter just drive Penning back 2-3 yards off the ball. But the other thing about doing that, guys, is very often it forces the back, not on this play necessarily, but very often, and actually they don't have the 2-2 techniques here, but we'll see that, I'm sure, with another play. But what it does is it takes the options away from the back, because now all of a sudden he's got someone in the backfield. The thing about zone runs is you want the back to be able to kind of run with patience and vision and pick his spot. If you can take away his options, in a sense, you're taking away his patience by penetrating, then the defense has a better chance of winning the down.
Right. And by the way, interesting to see Thomas Booker lined up over center there in kind of a zero tech, right?
And by the way, he had good snaps in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's, to your point, Zach Baun on the right. He's lined up as a stack linebacker.
Yeah, maybe they did switch. This is early in the down, so let me see.
Oh, there you
go. They did switch to the
They did.
Wow. That's exactly what happened. So we had just gone further. So Baun now had walked up, and you see them shift, and you have the 2-2 techniques. But what that means is you're lined up right over the guards. That's what a 2 technique is. Exactly. And that changes. Right now, the Saints, what they planned to in their blocking scheme just had to change.
Absolutely. And then again, from this angle, you can kind of see how the power of Jordan Davis to push back. I keep calling him Jalen Carter to push back Penning and then rip off and make the tackle along with
And
Brett.
then isn't that Booker who comes in as well?
I think it's
Is that,
Graham on
is
that
that
one.
Booker
Or
Graham? It
no,
was Graham.
it's all three. There's
BG.
Booker
Yeah,
late.
it's the
Yeah.
BG.
Yeah, absolutely. So good play there. And
Oh,
again,
wow. Look at
yeah.
BG. Greg,
Go ahead.
BG's 36 years old. How does he look to you so far?
He looks great given that it's 3 games in and he had to play 35 snaps, and we love BG and he's been an unbelievable Eagle, but all you wonder is, can he play 35 snaps a game? You know, that's why it's so important that you know, Nolan Smith plays better and that Bryce Huff plays better, because I doubt that the Eagles' plan was to play BG 35 snaps a game, but they needed to win this game.
All right, let's take another look, Greg, at another run defensive play that I think was pretty significant in the game. It's the second quarter. It is still 0-0. The Saints have the ball at the Eagles 43. This time the Saints are in an 11 personnel look, so a little bit different.
So the Eagles are in
And
nickel
go
here.
ahead. Go
So
ahead.
the Eagles are they're in 4-2 nickel. So if you can run it, Geoff, you know, just so I see what happens here. So they're in 4-2
start off in
nickel.
4-2 nickel. Yeah.
Okay, stop it, freeze it. So just before the snap, if you could, because you see how late Bond dropped down on the edge again. Now it ends up that the play I think is going to go away from him, but they're going to a 5-man front because they were in a 4-2 nickel here. And you're seeing, in some ways, you're seeing the Fangio template right here, because you've got the 2 shell look on the back end, almost 4 across. You know, that's what you're seeing. That's the Fangio shell.
And by the way, one little thing to note: this is a nickel, a 4-down lineman before Bond comes down. The ed here is Milton Williams.
Yes, because he's essentially aligned inside the tackle in what you know. So in what so he's not really a wide 9 defender here.
Right. So that creates the 5-man line on a wide zone to the right. And look
at the penetration again.
Look at the penetration
and that's Jalen
again.
Carter. See, look at the penetration.
It's right through it.
Notice again, I just want people to remember what we spoke about last week about moving laterally. He's not moving laterally.
Getting
and now
downhill.
look what Kamara has to do. Kamara has to stop his feet right there.
Yep.
No zone cut.
His feet.
Yeah, he's stuck.
There's nowhere to cut, nowhere to go.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go.
And
even if Carter doesn't make the play, which he kind of does, the point is other people can get there now.
Right. And just taking a quick look from here. Here's how it looks at the start.
And again, even in the 4-man front, guys, notice the 2-2 techniques. That was a foundation of what they did, because it makes it more difficult to block. That would be way too detailed to get into, believe me, so we won't do that. But just understand that makes it more difficult in a zone scheme when you have 2-2 techniques.
Right. And as Quentin Michael pointed out on Q&A last week, and again, against a different offense, but they had their edge rushers more in wide 9s, and their D tackles, interior guys, were in these gaps right here, and it left big bubbles right here. For the Falcons to be able to run.
There's no real bubble here the way this is set.
Right.
Now you could say there will be when Bond moves up, but again, now the play's already called. Not that they know the play, but the play's going the other way where there is no bubble.
Right.
But look at Carter. I mean, this is picture perfect.
Yep. And a nice edge set, by the way, by Milton.
Without question. So if he really if he was able to avoid Carter and bounce, there's no place to go.
Right. And
and then you get Davis, who's, by the way, Davis does a nice job here, because even though he's moving laterally but forward a little bit, it's not purely laterally. Look how he's moving forward a little bit.
Yep.
So he's able then to kind of finish up and clean up after Carter just blows up the play.
Right. I mean, these guys against Atlanta at times were almost 3 to 4 yards back, getting driven back, Greg, to your point.
Yeah, they were just running laterally. I mean, it was exactly how I was told years ago, and I mentioned this last week, that you do not play a zone run game, an outside zone run game. You don't run laterally.
Right. Excellent. All right. Well, the Jalen Carter, breakout performance continued. He was even good in the pass rush.
You just hope he does this every week. He's capable of being a dominant interior D lineman. That's what his traits are. I mean, if it wasn't for some, off the field issues, and we know he still needs to mature because of what he did at the end of the game, we know that. but he certainly would have been drafted before pick 9 if he was a clean player. He was a top 3 draft choice.
Oh, he's going to the Cardinals at number 2. There's no question.
Yeah.
Down the Gannons.
All right, let's look at what he did in the pass rush on this clip. This is actually pretty early in the game. I think it's on the 7th play for the Saints here. All right, so you have the Saints here. They are now in what looks to be 13 personnel. I'm sorry, 11. Yeah, 11 personnel.
They're in 11.
And that causes the Eagles to be in their kind of more traditional, conventional 4-man front.
Yeah, this is a little more of a base pass rush look where you have, more of the wide 9s and the 2 interior guys.
Right. So let's watch Jalen Carter.
And again, look at the Fangio. Look at the 4 across. That's the Fangio scheme.
Too deep.
You can go whatever. You can do anything from this.
Absolutely. And by the way, on a side note, that is Saints right guard. His name is Cesar Ruiz. And as Jason Avant pointed out, Ruiz and Jalen Carter faced each other when Michigan played Georgia in the Orange Bowl about 3 or 4 years ago, and Michigan got their clock cleaned. And Jason said he remembers Ruiz having a really tough time with Jalen Carter. So it's not a surprise.
Cesar Ruiz grew up in Mount Laurel, New Jersey.
Oh, that's right. I knew he was a local guy. Yeah. Local guy, but he struggled. So let's I'll run it here a little bit. You'll see the motion. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, you see the motion. Go ahead, because
and then now that causes the shift.
The switch again, but it's still a pass rush front.
Right. And then look at the move.
Look at Carter. Yep, I remember this play very well. Carter is going to pressure Carr, and I think he just throws it short to Mason Tipton, right? Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
But look how quickly, when I run it, I mean, just see how quickly after the shift, he just puts a swim on him and bam.
He does a club move first. And the thing that was so impressive to me about this was just the balance and body control, because you got to realize how big a man this is, because he kind of lost his balance briefly. It looked like right there, but then look how he's able to recover like a much smaller man. I mean, that's the most impressive part of that play.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of defensive tackles at that point would just get pushed to the side and be done.
Right. Now, as the play develops, Greg, you can see Olave from here running this sort of deep over. And honestly, if Derek Carr has a split second more, he may have a big gain there.
Well, they went to cover 3. They went from the 4 across look to cover 3, because look what happens. They went late rotation with Gardner Johnson going to the deep middle as the post safety, and Blankenship dropping down as a hook to curl defender. So they went to cover 3. So in cover 3, that Olave, in a sense, if you run this play, if you just keep running it, it's a flood concept. It's technically a 3-level stretch, but because of the pressure, he had to throw it to Tipton right now. But in a sense, it's a 3-level stretch with the vertical lifting the corner and the safety, Olave working into that void, because where he's working, technically, it's that defender, and I can't see who that is. It's the flat defender on the other side who technically would be responsible for Olave, but Olave's coming from the other side.
Right. I think that that's the nickel. I think that's Maddox there who's dropped.
That's Maddox. That is Maddox. Yeah.
Yeah. But the funny thing is this, to your point, Greg, look at Slay pointing at Olave saying, oh no, he's going to be open there. And then at the end.
Yeah, because it's zoned. So Slay's not running with him.
Right. Right. He's making sure, and then
he's probably saying something as well. They probably have a code word or whatever that he's yelling out. But you're right. This would have been a completion to Olave on the crosser. And by the way, he hit this same concept last week, that 39 yards. It plays out as post cross, even though there's a flood element as well, a 3-level stretch element.
Now check Olave. You're exactly right. He knows he's open. Look at him throw his hands up in the air after the pressure. He's like, oh man, look at all that space that I had. But again, if you focus on Jalen Carter, he's barreling down so quickly that even the pass to Tipton was incomplete, actually, because that's how much he was rushed.
Who was at the right end? Was that Milt Williams? Because they both met at the quarterback here.
Yeah.
The right end is
Sweaty. Oh, Sweaty.
Okay, Sweaty and Graham on the end.
His pressure rate's pretty good, by the way, lately.
Yeah.
So he beats Fuaga, the left tackle.
Nice.
No, it's a stunt.
No, stunt. Yep. There's a stunt right there. There's Booker. Yep. It's Booker. Wow.
See, and I made a note of this play, and I'll tell you why I made a note of this play, guys.
Okay.
Because when you have a rookie left tackle and a guy who played right tackle, by the way, in college, you want to attack him with stunts. Because technically, as soon as Sweat goes hard inside, Fuaga, not experienced at the NFL level. He'll learn this ideally. That guy goes hard inside like that, someone's going to replace him because you're not going to have two guys rushing the same gap.
Right.
So he went too far inside with Sweat. He'll learn that, hey, when the wide 9 guy goes inside like that, someone's replacing him. A stunt's coming. So he was unaware of that. Because I made a note of that play, Geoff, just for that reason.
Absolutely. Good stuff. All right. So that was, like I said, we could run 7
we
or
could
8
do
more
that.
clips.
Yeah. But the bottom
Not
line point is just to sum up, 5 and 6 man fronts, 6-man fronts in particular, really hurt the Saints run game, the outside zone run game. And as I made the point with the Patreon group, where they killed them was on first down, because the Saints had 20 first down plays, 21st and 10 first down plays. They gained 21 yards on those 20 plays.
Wow.
So,
incredible.
And they had a long of 6 too. So it just shows you there are some negative plays there. So, that was really the tactical approach with the 6-man fronts, the reduced splits, and that was a critical, the reduced fronts, I should say. That was a critical piece. That was really the tactical genius of this game.
Greg, last thing on defense before we move on to offense, just a quick summation. How do you feel like the safeties did in run defense compared to the week before? And how did Quinyon Mitchell hold up in coverage? In the few times
Mitchell held up well. They weren't tested a ton just because of the way the game played out. I mean, we talked about Mitchell having to defend one deep ball by Shaheed where he played him well. And it could have been caught though, and then maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But he was there. But Shaheed probably should have caught it. But it was one of those games, Geoff, where I didn't feel like the back end was tested that much. It didn't play out that way to me watching the tape. It just, and again, I'm sure there were plays that I'm missing because I can't remember every single play in great detail. I remember enough, but not every single one. Did you guys agree? It didn't feel like the back end was tested a lot.
I can think of just the Rashid Shaheed drop.
I mean,
honestly,
he did hit Olave on a cross. I mean, look, it's not like that the quarterback's gonna go 0 for 20. I mean, but it just didn't have that feel to it as a game.
Agree. Absolutely. Okay. I thought from a safety standpoint, they flowed well in run defense and came up and made some hits when they needed to.
Yeah. And I think there was a play that Mitchell was very much like his college days where, because he's an off coverage player. And he almost had an interception. And do you remember the play I'm talking about?
I do. Yeah, it went right off his hands.
It was 1st and 10 in the third quarter out of base 5-2, which became 6-1 on that play as well. Shaheed ran the speed out, and Mitchell drove on the throw and almost made the pick. That's the strength of his game. That's what he is right now. He's going to have to learn other things. He's going to have to get better with his eyes, and he's going to have to learn how to play press. But when you play him in off coverage and he can plant and drive, he's really, really good.
Absolutely. All right, we move over to the offensive side. And Adam, what was our discussion about what the Eagles needed to do? Who did they need to unlock to get their offense going without A.J. Brown?
A certain number, 88.
88, yes, 88. So, Greg, Dallas Goedert had, I think, 10 catches for 174 yards?
10 for 170, yeah.
10 for 170. My first question to you, did Dallas Goedert just play a better game, or did Kellen Moore figure out some ways to get the ball into his hands and manufacture this?
Combo. I mean, I thought that the second possession 43-yarder was a great example of personnel and design getting Goddard matched up on a safety and getting him the ball. That was scheme-based, and it was beautiful. That's one of those plays. That's one of those plays I think to myself, oh, maybe I'll use that in the matchup show somewhere down the road. It was a really well-schemed play.
Well, Greg, why don't we use it in Inside the Tape then right now?
Yes.
There you go.
All right. So we don't even have to wait for the matchup show. We get it here on Inside the Birds first. So here it is.
By the way, one of the reasons it was so well schemed is they were in 13 personnel, so they knew they were going to get base defense.
Right. Now, I didn't do a great job here, so I'm just going to set this up. Goddard is here as the
he was flexed. He was flexed.
This, I believe, is Calcaterra on the wide split, and this would be Jack Stoll.
Our friend Jack Stoll's back.
Yes.
Yes, Jack Stoll is back. So do you want me to run it in full so people can see, or do you want to describe what's going to happen?
it's essentially here. Don't run it yet. It's essentially a post-cross combination, which is a very common combination. But when you run it versus base, and the post receiver, who is Goddard, is in a really reduced or cut split, he's basically a flex tight end. He's going to run this route on a safety, especially when there's a receiver split outside of him. And so he ended up running this route on Matthew, a very good safety, but he's a safety, and Goddard, has him by 10 inches, 10 inches. He's just a bigger man. So you can run it now. This is just a beautifully designed play.
Is 13 personnel important here to give the appearance of a potential run that gets guys in the box?
Without question.
Right. So you see already 5 men at the line of scrimmage. They bring
so they're going to bring down the other safety.
Yep.
The other safety, not Matthew, the other safety is down in the box. So it becomes single high coverage. And you want single high when you run a post cross. That's what you want. Because Smith's going to run the crosser. You can see Smith run the crosser. And for a second, even Matthew gets his eyes on Smith, because he's, because Goddard doesn't run this route very often. So he's not thinking Goddard's going to run this route. And then Goddard runs a great route. Did you see him make it look like he was going to run a corner route?
Yep. Right here. He puts his foot in the ground right there, and it makes it look like
look at Matthew turn his body. That's the whole key to the play. That's the subtleties and nuances of route running. You don't just run to the post. You do that, and now Matthew turns his body, and boom.
Zach Ertz-esque right there.
And by the way, look at the pass pro. Look at the pass pro.
Oh, man. Look at that semicircle. Look at that. Is about as good of a pass pro as you can get. Yeah.
Even Adam could make this throw with that.
Yeah, but I can only throw 15 yards. Jeff's got a strong arm.
This is great design, Geoff. This is
beautiful.
A schemed play.
Right. That is exactly what we talk about. We talk about scheming a guy open, and here you can just see it from the wide.
You scheme it with personnel and formation and the route concept.
Yeah, there's the motion. Right, you have 2 different forms of motion in the play to really get the defense kind of off guard. Great protect. He could have climbed if he wanted to. He didn't need to, but I mean, he had so much space, Greg.
Yeah,
he could have ran for 40 yards.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So we all remember that.
That was
a good segue.
Yeah, that came right after a Smith 21-yarder. That was the play right before it on the shallow crosser.
Right.
So they had 2 big pass plays back to back, but that's beautiful. Kellen Moore, I think he's done a really good job with scheming plays. We talked about that last week when Hurts didn't throw it on a couple of them, but I think he's done a really good job with scheming plays.
How about offensively when it wasn't Dallas Goedert? They mixed the run game. And obviously, Saquon Barkley had a really good game, Greg. What did you notice from Saquon Barkley?
I mean, Barkley is just, I've studied Barkley in such great detail over the years. Going back to Penn State, we've had this conversation. Geoff, you're a Penn State guy, and you've agreed with me, even watching him at Penn State. Barkley never looked like, as he was always an explosive back, and he could take it to the house at any time, any point. But he never seemed like a real physical inside runner, despite his body type. And I think that he's running stronger inside. I think he looks way laterally quicker in confined space than I can recall. He's showing some suddenness to cut sharply and decisively in that confined space. I think he's looking as good as I've ever seen him look. And maybe it's because he's getting into a flow. Backs always talk about getting into a flow. But I think he's looked exceptionally good. Now, having said that, I thought that in the first half, Kellen Moore was a little too pass heavy. I think the offense, let's put it this way. I think the offense has to run through Barkley without being Barkley dependent with no pass game. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like you can't win in the NFL just saying, okay, let's give it to our back. Sure. Jalen Hurts is going to have to make throws, but I think it has to work off Barkley. And then you have Jalen, Jalen shouldn't be throwing the ball 40 times a game. To me, if the Eagles offense is playing the way I think it should play. But again, that's my opinion.
Sure. I had a great clip that I can't find, unfortunately, but Barkley, I think we've all discussed this as far as getting skinny through the hole, meaning making space where you don't think space exists, has done it. From my vantage point, a good job of that, where I didn't think he was very good with that with the Giants.
No, he was not.
Right. So good stuff there. What about the rest of the receiving group, Greg? There wasn't obviously a ton. Devontae had 7 for 79, but after that, it was sort of a smorgasbord of guys having 1 and 2 catches. Barkley had 4 catches for 9 yards. How sustainable is it to be able to just work
Well,
off
they're
of
missed.
this?
Look, they missed Brown. Obviously, he's a top 5 receiver in the league. So when you're missing that guy, it changes the way you probably call a game, and I think it changes the way Jalen plays, because we all know that Jalen at his core is not an innate anticipation thrower. It's one reason he doesn't necessarily work the middle of the field. And by the way, shallow crossers are not middle of the field throws. So I don't want people to say, well, look at all the balls he threw, to Goddard on the crosser, to Smith on this cross. Those are shallow crosses. Those are not truly working the middle of the field. So I think he feels comfortable when Brown's on the outside, that Brown can win outside the numbers, and that he's good. Those throws he's comfortable making. Because Jalen, in many ways, and I think it's been evident from watching him in his career, in many ways, he's a risk-averse quarterback. He does not like to make tough window throws. Now, he's physically capable of making them. I don't want people to think that he's incapable of throwing the ball, between the numbers against zone coverage, but I don't think he's comfortable doing that, because there's bodies there. If your timing's off just a little bit, a backside underneath defender can step in and knock it down or intercept it. I don't think that's his game. I don't think he's a window thrower versus zone coverage, but he's comfortable throwing it to the outside. And, I think that's where A.J. Brown is sorely missed. So we'll see what happens when he comes back. But I do want to say, talking about Kellen Moore scheming, I think we have to mention the Barkley 65-yard touchdown, because in many ways that changed the game, Geoff.
Okay.
And I think the overlooked part of that on the broadcast as well, because it was never discussed, was what they did away from that. They lined up in trips with 3 wide receivers to the wide side of the field, okay? And Barkley actually was also offset to the wide side of the field. So they had a bubble screen look to the wide side of the field, even though the play call was absolutely a Barkley inside zone run, but they had a bubble screen call that removed the 2 slot defenders. It expanded Adebo and Taylor. It removed them from run support because of the bubble screen element to that play. And that's what allowed Barkley to go 65 yards. Because if those guys, if it was just a straight handoff and they just had the receivers, let's say, running up to block, he wouldn't have run 65 yards for a touchdown, because there would have been too many people there.
Right.
But that bubble screen element removed those defenders and allowed Barkley, once he cleared the second level, to have no one there.
And if there's one thing we don't question about Saquon, it's when he gets into the
No, he
second
can
level
run.
and there's nobody there, he's going to take that for a
He
long
can
way.
run.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Greg, the last thing I would like for us to look at is the play of the game, really, which would wind up being the Goddard 61-yard catch.
And by the way, they
set up
ran
to
a
go
ton of
ahead.
shallow crossers in this game. They ran a ton of them.
Right. So we will take a look at that, and you'll explain exactly how a guy could get that wide open in that situation.
It was mesh. It was mesh
concept.
Yeah.
Describe what mesh means for people. I don't know if they all.
Mesh means it's mirrored shallow crosses. One comes from each side. So when they cross, they mesh, So the whole idea is that you try to create traffic for the defense so that a defender either has to run around or he gets caught up. In this case, it was different because they played with a robber here. So what happened is, believe it or not, the Saints, which again, I don't rip coaches, but I was surprised. The Saints went cover 1 robber. Okay. Yeah. And by the way, Davis was not in the game. He got hurt late. He was not in the game. So it was 3rd and 16, and they went cover 1 robber. And you know why that's important? And I'll explain it, Geoff, as you show the play. Because what happens with cover 1 robber, Goddard's going to run obviously from the right side of the formation, but I think it was Dotson who was the other mesh player.
Yes.
And if you notice, the robber Howden, because of stop if you could, because of man coverage, and because Goddard was so tight to the formation, notice that Harris, who was man to man on him, is immediately trailing him. So now Howden, who's the robber, he's thinking, the term we use for that is he wants to cut the crosser.
Right.
He knows that Harris is not going to be in position to play Goddard on the crosser. So Howden, the robber, is going to cut the crosser, meaning he's going to attack Goddard. That's what, fortunately for the Eagles, unfortunately for the Saints, posed the problem, because he's looking to cut the crosser to play Goddard, and look what happens.
Boom. Boom.
So the guy covering Dotson, who I think's the slot corner, I can't tell who, exactly who that is, but it's,
I think that's Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah, they run into one another. And because it's funny, when I first saw this play, because I saw it developing, I thought, God, they're throwing the ball 40 yards on 3rd and 16, and they need, it's 3rd and 16, but they got lucky. I mean, there's no other way around it. They got lucky. But
because I know the Eagles ran a mesh concept earlier in the game that got them.
They ran a number of them.
Right, and it got them yards, but not 40 or 61 yards or whatever.
No, they ran mesh. And actually, the Smith 21-yarder, which was the play right before the Goddard 43-yarder, was mesh as well. Yep. But that's what happened. He tried to cut the crosser, which is good play, by the way. Howden did absolutely the right thing, and actually that's Lattimore. That's not Taylor.
23 is Lattimore. Yes.
Oh yes, you're right. Yeah, boom. Oh man.
And
boy,
you guys all know how coaches are, right? And how much sleep they lose when they don't execute a play in a time like that. I mean, I'm sure they practice mesh concepts against them all the time.
Of course they do. Everybody runs mesh.
Right.
Dotson does a great job here, though. He really does.
He does.
Well, Dotson has to avoid Harris because if he hits Harris, they're going to call OPI for sure.
Right there as he avoids them. Creates that space. They run into each other. It's three stooges in the middle of the field, and Dallas Goedert running wild there.
If you're the Saints, you are tearing your hair out with this that play.
Imagine.
Because it's not like they played it incorrectly.
Nope. Just had a stumble and a bumble, as our friend Chris Berman would say.
But,
So let's finish up on your overall impression of Hurts. We've already gone in. I think most people know by now that Devontae Smith was sort of the root cause of that interception by the way he ran that route. I know that's been well chronicled.
Which he was.
Yes.
He was,
yes. But your overall impression, I know Adam and I observed that we felt that Hurts did a good job of hanging in the pocket and not bailing more when there wasn't pressure to have to, to stay in there. Your thoughts?
Look, Hurts has now played a lot of games, okay? And there's no question the year they went to the Super Bowl, he was great. And, how many deep balls down the sideline did he hit to Brown?
Yeah.
You can't live on those. So I think the league knows what Hurts is, and we all know what Hurts is. And by the way, that doesn't mean he's a bad player. So I don't want people to take it the wrong way. Hurts is a quality quarterback. You can obviously win with Jalen Hurts as your quarterback. There's things he does well, and there are things he does not do as well as you would like. So the question is, because he's played so many games now, is this who he is, or is there still room for improvement? Because overall, a couple of things when I've watched every Hurts snap, as an Eagle. And of course I did him coming out of Oklahoma as well. But he needs to become more consistently decisive in the pocket with his reads and throws. There are times he's just not decisive. There are too many times for a veteran quarterback in which he does not turn it loose on throws that are there within the primary read. He just needs to become more decisive. And then there are times he just does not make the intuitive and immediate connection between the route concept and the coverage. And that's when he tends to pull it down and leave the pocket.
Right.
So these are things he needs to work on. And, Kellen Moore will figure this out. Look, the bottom line is, and you can say what you want about the Super Bowl year, and it was an unbelievable year, and it was an MVP type year for Hurts. But the reality is Shane Steichen changed things in the middle of the season, which was the smart thing to do because he understood what Hurts is and what Hurts isn't. And by the way, that's good coaching, and that's not a knock on the quarterback. There's very few transcendent quarterbacks, okay? So, very few quarterbacks have, quote-unquote, no weaknesses. So people should not take this as, oh, you don't like Hurts. No, there's things he does well. There's things that he needs to continue to work on. That's probably true of 30 of the 32 quarterbacks in the league.
100%.
If not 31 of them,
Yeah, right.
And then, by the way, I could even say Mahomes has some issues that he needs to work on as well. So, you have to understand that that's not a knock on a quarterback. That's why there's coaches.
Right. Absolutely. And we'll see if Shane Steichen can summon up some of that magic for his newest quarterback now, because
he's going to need to do that with Anthony Richardson. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. That is great stuff. That is Inside the Tape, breaking down the Eagles' win, razor thin win over the New Orleans Saints. And up next is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And of course, all three of us will be back at this time next week to break down that game as well and really go inside all the great schemes with Greg. So for Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching Inside the Tape. Bye.